Howdy folks, welcome back to another episode of Rantings and Ravings. It's me, here I am, I'm back. You get wet hair again today, sorry about that. It's just the way that it is, I guess. I'm really nervous about today's video. I don't know why, but I think it's because I've poured a lot of time and effort into making this a good one, and I want it to be good. So I'm a little nervous, I'm a little jittery. But today we will be starting a series that I am going to call Motherhood in Media. And we're just going to sit down and we're going to talk about media and the representation of women, specifically mothers. So for reference, the way that this episode, the beginning episode, is going to be a little bit different because I had planned this episode before I had planned like a whole series, if that makes sense. And the way that we're going to kind of structure this is we're going to split mothers in media up into 4 main archetypes. Obviously there will be overlap between these archetypes and then also some that sort of fit, sort of don't. There are probably other archetypes, but these are the first 4 that I'm kind of going with, and that's the evil mother, the bad mother, the tragic mother, and the good mother. So I think that's where we're going to start, and I'll just go through the list and explain to you what I mean by those things, and then yeah, we'll start there. The evil mother is like the morally wicked person. She does bad things all the time, or maybe just some of the times. She dabbles in being bad, but she is not an upright, upstanding member of society, and she's a mother. And sometimes those things like coalesce, they coincide, but not always. So for example, you have the evil stepmother from Cinderella. She's a horrible person, and she's also a really bad mom in a lot of ways. Cersei Lannister, I think, is also a really good description of this, or she falls into this description. She's a horrible person, and she's a mom. Walburga Black from the Harry Potter series, we don't know very much about her, but we know that she was a bad person, and she was a bad mom. And then from Once Upon a Time, Regina, especially when she is in evil mode, I guess, morally apprehensible, right? She kills people, bad person, and a mother. And now when I say evil mother, that doesn't mean she's a bad mother. So like Regina is not a bad mom. She's a pretty decent mom. She's just a horrible person. So there's that. And I think that would be a really interesting dynamic to discuss. Mother Gothel is also an evil mother. Motherhood extends beyond just blood, right? So I'm including people in here who are not blood related to their children because I don't think that that's like absolutely necessary. So I did want to include step parents, adopted parents, parents who maybe not formally adopted them, but they picked them. They said, that's my kid. And those mothers are also going to be included in here. On to the bad mother. So the bad mother, whether she's genuinely evil or she's simply under-equipped to deal with her children and her own like feelings and emotions, she is still a bad mom. Yeah, she may or may not murder a person, but she is not good with her children. So there's that. And an example of this might be Alicent Hightower, specifically from the HBO adaptation of Fire and Blood. I feel like Fire and Blood, Alicent Hightower is maybe more evil mother, but the TV show, Olivia Cooke, is bad mother, I'd say. Petunia Dursley is a bad mom. She's not necessarily a good person either, but she's not evil. And that's the tea on that. Snow White from Once Upon a Time, I think she's a bad mom. Like, she's a good person. She's not a very good mom. Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, I don't think she's a good mom. Yes, she's trying to do what's best for her kids, but that's not always all that matters, you know. I think about poor Mary Bennet. The mom from Next to Normal, I understand there are extenuating circumstances to why she is a bad mom, but she is still a bad mom. We've got Shauna Shipman from Yellow Jackets. Talk about bad mom. Okay, wow. She's also kind of evil leaning. On the other hand, why am I not going to remember her name right now? Taina. I love her. she's probably my favorite character in that show. She is a good mom, I'd say. But she's also evil leaning, so she might be evil mom. I don't know. Joyce Summers from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, bad mom. And Yennefer Vengerberg, don't even get me started on The Witcher. And don't get me started on Yennefer. She sucks. Okay, then we have a tragic mother. So the tragic mother is probably one of the most popular, the most common, because a lot of mothers in media are dead at the beginning or die at the beginning. And I think that does lend itself to being a tragic mother. Think like characters that haunt the narrative, specifically women, specifically moms, who haunt the narrative and are the driving force for the main character. They either start off dead, they get dead, or they end the whole thing dead. So this is kind of the overarching, a lot of women are in this category, a lot of moms. And this does often correlate with good moms. I feel like a lot of good moms are also tragic moms if they die or if their kids die or whatever. Lily Potter, epitome of haunting the narrative. Padme Amidala, Rhaenyra Targaryen, Daenerys Targaryen, Wanda Maximoff from Marvel. Don't even get me started. I think Emma Swan falls into this category because she wants to be a good mother and she loves her son and she's a good person, but there is so much else going on that is constantly dragging her away from Henry. I'll talk about that at some point, I'm sure. Boromir and Faramir's mom, I'm not remembering her name off the top of my head right now, but that's tragic. She's tragic. Olivia Crane from Haunting of Hill House. I love her, and she deserved better. Shmi Skywalker, Caitlin Stark, Kaya from Avatar: Last Airbender, Katara and Sokka's mom, Mrs. Wayne as in Bruce Wayne's mother, and then Dis from The Hobbit. Now, not all these characters are super prominent, but they are a driving force in a lot of these stories, and or their kids are, and then the loss of those children is what makes them tragic to me. So a good mom, she's doing her best. She really is doing her best, and sometimes her best is great. She's doing a good job. Most of her children are semi well-adjusted or well-adjusted, and they all make it out. Maybe not all of them, but most of them do. She might not, but we'll see. So this is an incredibly short list, but I have Molly Weasley, Brea Organa, because she is Leia's mom and she's great at it. Beru, in a similar avenue as Brea. Elizabeth Swann, we don't get much of Elizabeth Swann as a mother, but the way that her son is in the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie, you can kind of tell she was a good mom. Gisela from The Last Kingdom, now that's a good mother. Ramonda from the Black Panther movies, she's a great mom. And I didn't want to put her in tragic mother, even though she kind of is, but I think overall her narrative is so much more hopeful than it is sad, which a lot of the tragic mothers, their narrative is sad and it's really just depressing. But especially in Wakanda Forever, she kind of is this beacon of hope, even when she passes away. Anyway, and then the mom in Edward Scissorhands, I don't remember what her name is, but that little PTA MLM mom, I love her. I think she is a good mom, and she does her gosh darn best for her kids, and then also for this poor boy she found in a haunted mansion on the top of a hill. So that's kind of the categories we're working with. Now, you might disagree. That's totally fine. I love some conversation, and there is room for moving these people around because archetypes work in an essence, but people are so much more complicated. So putting Regina in Evil Mother doesn't negate the fact that she's also a good mom. She is a good mom to Henry, especially after season 1 when she kind of veers away from her evilness, even though she still has some darkness in her. She's a good mother, so she's not just fixed in place. And then obviously as we go on, there will be other women that we talk about, but that's just kind of how I'm structuring things, is putting them into one of these 4 categories and then discussing it. And I kind of want to do one from each category, or like compare characters from the same universe. You know, like what's the difference between Cersei Lannister and Catelyn Stark? Like why are they so different? You know, or Regina versus Emma versus Snow, you know, like that kind of stuff. I think that would be very interesting, and we'll just see how things go, and that's kind of my plan moving forward. But today, in this episode, we are talking about two very different women, but in a sense, there are similarities. Just bear with me, okay? The first woman that we are talking about is Mary. Mary as in the Madonna, as in Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I think she is the foundation for so many mothers in media. She is like the starting point, you know? And talking about media and being like, well, we're bringing the Bible into this. I also plan on bringing like other mythological and historical people into this conversation. I just listed off a bunch of fictional people, but there will also be historical and mythological women, mothers as well. But the reason that I wanted to talk about Mary is she kind of will be our starting ground. She is the good mother, you know? She is the tragic mother. And there is so much media surrounding her, from the Bible to statues to paintings, hymns that have been sung for centuries, that I think we can discuss her in this way, in a way that is analytical, but also not diminishing of who she was. I believe she was a real person. You know, she was a real person who had a real baby, several of them. And one of those babies just happened to be the savior of the universe. And then she lost him. And I think I just want to talk about her is kind of the end of the matter. I've got a lot to say about Mary. And then after Mary, we will jump back into the Last Kingdom, as we're always going to do. And we're going to talk about Aelswith, who is the wife of King Alfred the Great. She was not queen, she was his consort. And I want to talk about her, and she falls steadily into the bad mother category. She does her best with what she was given in the very strict confines that a woman is given in that time period, in the very beginning of the Dark Ages, the medieval period. I think she does her best. She doesn't do a good job. I mean, you want to talk about being a good mom, we'll look at Gisela at some point, and maybe we'll come back and compare some things with Aelswith, but she is a bad mom. She's a bad person. She might be a good queen, or a good consort. And I guess that's kind of in this world, the give and take that you have. You get to be one or the other, kind of, essentially. So there will be spoilers in this for the Bible and also for The Last Kingdom. Specifically, Season 5, I will be talking a lot about Season 5 and the things that go down. So if you're interested in watching that show, then you can watch it anyway. I mean, who cares about a few spoilers, right? Anyway, so I think, I have to tell you guys something. I have to make a confession. There will be no episode of what I whittled this week, because I whittled nothing this week. And that's because I was doing this. I was pouring all of my time into research and notes and sort of scripting that I did no whittling. And I apologize profusely from the bottom of my heart. I also want to talk about, really quickly before we get into the story, why this is so important to me. I'm not a mother. I'm just a lady. I'm just a girl. But I think my relationship with the concept of motherhood has always been like, so weird. Because for probably the first 21 years of my life, I was like, I don't want to have children. I am so terrified of them. Like, I am a baby of myself. How am I supposed to have a baby and then raise that baby to be a functioning adult? Like, it never seemed like it was in the cards for me. And then I had this stupid dream my senior year of college where I had a son, and his name was Jude, and he was the most precious thing to me. Oh my gosh. And I woke up and obviously he didn't exist, but ever since then, it's been 5 years now, and I have just been reeked like baby fever, and I just want one. And obviously that's not the same thing as being a mom. But ever since then, like, the idea of motherhood and all these moms in media that we see has just been so tragic to me, and nothing will make me cry faster than like a mom or like a mom losing her child. A child losing their mother is sad for sure, but the other way around, oh brother. When Theoden says in Two Towers, no parent should ever have to bury their child, I weep like a baby every time I watch that scene. It's devastating. And there was this one time a few months ago, I was talking with some friends, and we were all like writer friends. We were talking about books and narratives and storytelling and whatnot. And one thing that we were discussing was like, what's one thing that you'll never put in a book, or like things that you just don't write about? And I was like, I cannot write about parents losing their children. Like, I'm so sorry. I know that it's a real thing that happens, but like, you won't catch me writing a main character who has a child and then loses that child, because the concept of it is so devastating that I don't think I could even physically do it. I have two exceptions to that rule. One is a story that I made or like developed before I had that dream and then that mindset, and I have not touched it since then, but like, it does exist. It does exist in the ether. And then the other one is kind of, it's me exploring those feelings a lot, so I did it on purpose after I like had that discussion with them, to kind of explore the concept of motherhood and like, you lose a child and what are you now that you are no longer a mother to that child, like what and this is coming from someone who's never experienced it. Anyway, that's a bit about me. I'll cry like a baby whenever, like the end of Wanda, what's it called? WandaVision? Don't even touch me with that show, because holy moly. Anyway, so if I start weeping in the middle of this video, don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Anyway, sorry for the sniffing as well. I'm ill. Sorry about that. It's gonna happen. I'll try to edit out as much of it as I can, but I'm sick, so. Well, let's get into it, I suppose. Now that we've already spent almost 20 minutes talking about the introduction, let's talk about Mary, the mother of Jesus. I want to start kind of by reiterating what I said earlier, which is my belief that she was a real individual. She was a real person who had a real son who really died and who, really saved the world, right? But a lot of how we will be looking at her is through representations of her through separate mediums, sculptures, paintings, etc., and how she is perceived by us, the rest of us people who are here. So we won't be looking at her as though she were fictional, and not necessarily talking about the historicity of her as an individual, but just how she is represented and the ways that she represents motherhood as a whole. I don't intend on saying anything that could be incorrect. I know that there, obviously, who comes out here to say things that are wrong? But I know that as, Catholics and Orthodox Christians, they do venerate Mary in a different way than, Protestants would. And as a Protestant myself, we have a very different view of Mary. But I think we can kind of set that aside, because we can just look at what it says about her in Scripture, which we will do momentarily and briefly. And then we can look at how she's portrayed in these media, and we can talk about that without going into the theology. Right? But if there is anything that I do say that isn't accurate to certain beliefs, I would be very open to hearing about that. So just let me know. I don't mean to say anything that might offend or inaccurately portray how she is viewed by specifically Catholics and Eastern Orthodox and Coptic, other sects of Christianity. So we will be walking through the biblical texts that speak about her, and then we will be looking at her in certain sculptures, specifically the Pietà. I don't think I'm saying that correctly because I'm not Italian, so I don't exactly know how I'm supposed to... Is it Italian or is it French? I don't know. I know I am a righteous man, and by my virtues I am justly... Oh my gosh, I have to talk about I do actually have to talk about that. I haven't, it's in none of my notes, but remind me, I'm putting it here, after hymns, we're going to talk about hellfire. Because we have to. Okay. I forgot what I was saying. We're gonna look at the Peata, and then we're also gonna look at a few other sculptures, and then we're gonna focus a lot on paintings, because I feel like there's a lot more versatility in paintings than there are in sculptures. And then we're just gonna look at 2 hymns, nothing crazy, and then obviously, apparently, all of a sudden, I'm gonna talk about hellfire from the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So let's buckle in and let's just get started. And we're going to start with the biblical texts. Of my virtue I am justly proud. Beata Maria. So, Mary. Who is Mary? Most of our, if not all of our understanding of who Mary is comes from the Bible. So that is what we will be using as our, I don't know if it would be I guess it would be a primary source. We're using that as a primary source as to who Mary is. We're going to start probably in Luke. I feel like Luke takes us the farthest back. So when we're discussing who Mary is, Luke does have the Gospel of Luke has a genealogy that is different from the one in Matthew, and the one in Matthew is directly attributed to Joseph. And so there are a lot of biblical scholars who believe that the genealogy of Jesus in Luke is attributed to Mary. I didn't include it because it doesn't say Mary in there, but I did want to put that out there, that there is that genealogy that is attributed to Mary. So there's just that starting there. Mary's age when she became Joseph's wife, and before that, like slightly before that, pregnant, is up for debate. I have my Bible that I use is an archaeology study Bible, so a lot of all the study notes are like historical context of passages and themes within the time period, I suppose. And it does mention in the Matthew study notes in Matthew 1:18 through 19, it does say that Mary's potential age is anywhere between when she started puberty and her young 20s. A lot of people will say that she's in her early teens, but the study Bible that I have does say that there is text and there is evidence from that time period that women were still getting married into their early 20s. They're not like past the age of marriage. So it is possible that she's anywhere between probably 12, 13, whenever she hit puberty, and her early 20s. So she's still a very young woman. Whatever the age of her is, she's either like what we would perceive as a young girl, and what we would perceive as a young woman. Their perception of age and maturity and when you are a child versus when you are an adult is different. This is the 1st century CE or AD, so it's very different then as it is now. Anywhere between 12 and early 20s. We'll start there. And so then we'll jump into Luke. Yeah, Luke. So starting in Luke 1:27, and I'm reading from the KJV. This is a new thing for me. I've just decided that my phone my Bible on my phone is going to be in the KJV for some reason. I'll just read a bit and I'll put it up so you can read it yourself as well. Luke 1:27, to a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this should be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God shall give him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. Then Mary said unto the angel, How shall this be, seeing I know not a man? And the angel answered and said unto her, The Holy Ghost shall come upon thee, and the power of the Highest shall overshadow thee. Therefore also that holy thing which shall be born of thee shall be called the Son of God. And behold, thy cousin Elizabeth, she hath also conceived a son in her old age, and this is the 6th month with her, whom was called barren. For with God nothing shall be impossible. And Mary said, Behold, the handmaiden of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word. And the angel departed from her. Mary rose in those days and went into the hill country with haste into the city of Judah. So that's Luke 1:27 through 39. And this is like 2 verses later. And it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Ghost. And she spake with a loud voice, and said, Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. And whence is this to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For lo, as soon as the voice of thy salutation sounded in mine ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. And blessed is she that believed, for there shall be a performance of those things which were told to her from the Lord. And Mary said, My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour, for he hath regarded the low estate of his handmaiden. For behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath done to me great things, and holy is his name. And his mercy is on them that fear him from generation to generation. He hath showed strength with his arm. He hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He hath put down the mighty from their seats, and exalted them of low degree. He hath filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he hath sent away empty. He hath holpen his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, and he spake to our fathers, to Abraham, and to his seed forever. And Mary abode with her about 3 months, and returned to her own house. So there we have Mary. The Annunciation is what it's called often, where the angel comes to Mary either right when she's newly pregnant or right before she's pregnant, and tells her about the baby, which is Jesus. He tells her that it's God's plan, and she is cool with it. Like, she's probably terrified, but you can see that she praises God when she goes to see Elizabeth. She is excited, and I for some reason don't have any parts of where she actually gives birth to the baby, but you might know the story. She and her husband Joseph are looking for a place to have this baby. Months later, the only place that they can go is a stable in the back of an inn, and so this is where Mary gives birth. Probably incredibly uncomfortable. It's probably loud. There are animals. It's dirty, and it's smelly, and it's gross, and it's no place for any woman to be giving birth. And he's born in a stable, and they lay him in a manger. And so we have from Luke 2:16, when the first visitors come. And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Okay, now we're going back to Matthew. We're going to Matthew 2. So this is after the wise men have come and given their gifts. Herod, who is like the ruler of Jerusalem at this point, he hears that there has been a king who's been born in a manger in Bethlehem, and he doesn't like that because he's in charge. He wants to remain in charge, and he doesn't like this idea that there is someone out there who could take his place. So that's kind of the context. Matthew 2:14, when Joseph, arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and younger, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. And I just think about the absolute suffering that came from this, and all of the women who had also just had children, had just had their babies, and now they, by decree of the king, they are all dead. And that's just really devastating to me. And then we're going back again to Luke 2:43. The context for this, after they've come back from Egypt about a couple years later, they came to Jerusalem to the temple for a festival. that's the context of this. Luke 2:43, and when they had fulfilled the days as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they returned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said unto him, Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing. And I think that's just like the heart of a mother who cannot find her baby. And obviously at this point, Jesus is no longer a baby. I think he's 12. He's a young boy. You know, that's just the sorrow of a mother who thinks she's lost her son. And I can't imagine how terrifying that must be. And then we're going to jump John 2. This is after Jesus is a fully grown man. But this is when he and his mother are at a wedding in Cana. And I just think this part's kind of funny. I just wanted to read it. And when they, John 2:3, and when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother saith unto the servants, Whatsoever he saith unto you, do it. So Jesus is like, Mom, I'm not doing miracles yet. But Mary's like, you can. Like, I know you can. Which I think is, I just think it's a testament to how much she has faith in her son, that he is also the Son of God, and kind of a testament to how much she trusts him. Like, he's kind of like, girl, I'm not doing that yet. Like, that's not my thing right now. And she just turns to the servants and says, whatever this guy says, do it. And I love that little tiny tidbit into their relationship. So then we're going John 2:12, which happens after the wedding at Cana. It just says, After this he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. So this just kind of shows at the very early beginnings of Jesus' ministry. Mary was there with him and it seems like his brothers. So we're going to jump back to Mark 6. This is at a point when he was teaching, and there were some people who came to like witness his teaching, and they say in Mark 6:3, Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph, and of Judah and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. So it's clear that they know him based on his family. And I think it's really interesting that they say Mary specifically. In this scene, I think in Matthew 13:55, they say, Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Whence then hath this man all these things? I just think it's very interesting that they knew him based on who his mother was. And obviously they knew his siblings, and his father was a carpenter, but they named Mary as being his mother. I just think that's very sweet. Mary isn't mentioned much in the scripture, like after his birth, and then between his birth and his death, she isn't in it very much. Those are kind of like our only examples of her. But that means that we got to get into the crucifixion. So before Jesus, like as he's going to the cross, this is Luke 23:26, and they led him away. They laid upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. And then in 27 it says, and there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but for yourselves and for your children. And that part doesn't mention Mary, that she was there among them. Example, Mark 15:40, there were also women looking afar off. Among them was Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James, and James the Less, and of Joseph and Salome, who also, when he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered unto him, and many other women which came up with him into Jerusalem. Again, a group of women. Here we go, Matthew 27:56. 27:55. And many women were there beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him. So these are the same women that we just read about in Mark 15, among which was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. Okay, we got all those people. We're going to John. Right, John 19, you have Mary Magdalene, Mary, who's the mother of all these other guys, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. which are two of his disciples. Now in John 19:25, it says, "Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene." Here we see that she was there. And then John 19:26, continuing, "When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciples standing by, whom he loved," this being John who wrote this gospel, "he saith unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then saith he to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour that disciple took her unto his own home. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, saith, I thirst." And I just think it's so sweet that one of the very last things that Jesus does before he dies is ensure that his mother is taken care of by the disciple whom he loved. John is the only disciple who's here. And I think that's all the other ones flee after the Garden of Gethsemane. And something about that is very heavy. He sees the one disciple who stuck by him and said, this is the one that's going to take care of my mom. And I think also the mother of the sons of Zebedee are here. And I wonder if she's there at this cross, at the crucifixion, wondering where her sons are. Like, the last she knew of them, they were with him. And now this guy's hanging on the cross, he's about to die. I can't imagine, like, the sorrow and the grief and the wondering where her sons are. And yet she's still choosing to be here. Luckily, that's not the last we see of Mary. So John takes care of Mary, takes her to his own house. And then we see her in Acts 1:14, "These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brethren." And so this is after Jesus has gone back to heaven. He's risen from the dead. He's talked to his people. He said hello to the people who he needed to say hello to. He's given his last commands, and he's ascended into heaven. And there we see that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is with her other sons and with the disciples, the apostles, and she's still with them, engaging with them. And I think that's a happy ending for her, the happiest that she could have after seeing the suffering that her son went through on the cross and throughout his entire life, really. Those are the texts that we have within Scripture that mention Mary, talk about Mary, and we sort of can piece together this life that she's had. And the rest that we can infer, about her life being a mother. She has other sons and other daughters, however many that is, who's to say. At some point her husband dies. We don't see Joseph after the beginning of the Gospels, other than the mention of Jesus being a carpenter's son. So we don't know how long he lived or who took care of Mary, but clearly Jesus wanted John to do it. John, who is not his cousin, John the Baptist, but John, who is the author of John. Different John. And Revelation as well. And I think the 3 Johns at the end. That John. Anyway, that's Mary in Scripture. Now let's move on to Mary in sculpture. While you were away, I painted my nails. I'm zoning. What am I saying? Phasing. I'm phasing out of acrylics, so they were kind of jacked. And while I was waiting for that last segment to upload, painted them. They're still kind of jacked, but leave me alone. Okay, we're talking about Mary in sculptures. Okay, this one isn't technically a sculpture, but it isn't a painting, it's a carving, so I'm including it. And this one is called the Icon of Lamentation. So this is from the Byzantine Empire around the 12th to 13th century. So we're talking early-ish medieval, but not technically medieval because it's Byzantine. And so this is the Lamentation of Mary. You can see her there, and she's holding the body of Jesus after he's come down from the cross, and there are some angels who are above them, and then I believe that's John next to her, and then possibly the other Mary behind him. So the Icon of Lamentation is also called the Threnos, and Threnos is just a Latin word, and it kind of encapsulates this whole paintings or sculptures that kind of reference this segment, which is Jesus coming down from the cross before he is buried. And this is what later goes on to inspire the Pietà. So from the Icon of Lamentation, we can move on to the Peata. I hope I'm saying it right. I don't think I am, but don't laugh at me too much, please. So the most famous one of these statues is Michelangelo's Peata that is in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It was his first. It's sometimes called the Vatican Peata because he actually does 3. He has 3 that he's done over the course of his lifetime. This is the most complete. It's the probably the one that you think of when you're thinking of this kind of image, right? Mary holding the dead body of Jesus. So one of the main aspects of this kind of sculpture is that typically Mary, she doesn't look like she's actively mourning. She's not weeping. She's not like hunched over his body, holding him to her chest. She's not overwhelmed. She's not hysterical. She's just holding him. And there's this kind of like numbness in her that I just think is devastating in its own way, because she knew that this was going to happen. Like, she's always known this was going to happen from the moment she held him as a baby. She knew that he was going to be here. He was going to die. And so whether it's numbness or it's acceptance or it's just like she's incapable of processing what's going on at this moment, you kind of see that in her. And I like in this one, her other hand that's not holding him is kind of like, it's kind of, you see it. You see it. It almost looks like she's praying, like when people pray and they raise their hands, they lift their hands. It looks like she's almost doing that. The second Peata by Michelangelo is called the Bandini Peata, and it was made for his own tomb in the year 1547 or to 1555. I think I forgot to mention the first one that he made when he was very young. It was one of his first sculptures. It was made between 1498 and 1499. So this second Peata he made for his own tomb. So this was going to go, Michelangelo made this one for his own tomb. So you see the central figure of Jesus here, and he's slumped, it's like he's still coming down from the cross before they've laid him down. And again, you have John in the back, or it could be Nicodemus, I suppose, as well. Then you have another Mary, probably Mary Magdalene, and then you have Mary, Jesus' mother, behind him, and he's kind of like slumped back, and she's the one who's holding most of his weight, and that is just so sad. And then the third is the least finished, and this is because Michelangelo was making this one up until he died. So this was made in 1564, and the week of his death he was working on this. That's why it looks so unfinished. This one's called the Rondinini Peata. And again, you have the central figure of Jesus, and Mary is behind him. And it's another one of those, he's being like still slumped down as he's coming down from the cross, and she's behind him holding him and like lowering him to the ground. So these are the 3 Peatas by Michelangelo. But then there are a whole bunch of other ones. So these following ones all come from the book that is entitled The Peata in French Late Gothic Sculpture, Regional Variations by William H. Forsyth. It's a very fascinating book that talks about the differences, I guess the regional variations. So if you're interested in art history, this is a very good read, because this specific type of sculpture was so common and so popular, especially for tombs and churches. You can really see how it changes from place to place. The earliest existing Peata that we have is from 1320, around that time period, from Germany. And by the time it gets to France, it obviously has changed. So this is the first one from Germany. You can see like Mary's face is very sad. She looks very sad. Her lips are downturned, her eyebrows are furrowed, and she's holding Jesus in her lap like he was still a child. She's put her hand on his knees to keep him steady and a hand on his waist to keep him steady, but he is very clearly not alive. You can see his ribs, he's emaciated, but he's very upright, which is very different from the ones that we see later in France, and even the one Michelangelo's first Peata. He's very horizontal, and this one she's like holding him upright. And our next one I think this one is from France. It's from a hospital. All these are the late Gothic period, so that's all what we're dealing with. I feel like this is a very typical Beata. This is kind of what we see more often than not. That very solemn look from Mary, but she's not like overcome with emotion. Jesus, who is laying in her lap dead, and his side has been cut where he was stabbed on the cross. It's just very kind of a baseline, I would say. So also is the first Michelangelo Pieta. There's not a lot of feeling here. It's just kind of, it almost feels like stone, which obviously it is. But some of the other ones feel a little bit less like that. This one is also these two are also from a hospital. They're very similar. Something that so they follow the style of the Pieta and the Notre Dame. I don't have a picture of that, but just know that they do. What I really like about these variations is he looks heavy. You know, when someone dies, obviously they're heavy, and they get even heavier as they, like, rigor mortis and all that. And she has to, like, hold him in her lap, where it looks like he's falling off, but she's, like, holding him to her. You know, the hand that's cradling his head, the hand that's cradling his side, and then it looks like he's kind of sliding off of her, but she's keeping him there. Jeez, that's devastating. Okay. The next one, very similar. This one is in the Church of St. John Baptiste. Again, it's almost like he's rolling off of her, and she is trying to hold him to her. But again, you see like the solemnness in her. She's not weeping, she's not clutching at him, she's just trying to keep her baby boy in her lap, and that's like all. Oh my gosh. This one, I like the way that she's cradling his head, and like, it's not just like she's not holding it flat, like her fingers are curled, like she's trying to lift his head or hold his head there, or even like stroke his hair like she might have done when he was little. And then the way that his hand is like resting over hers. Like, excuse me. He's obviously dead, but like you can see him as a young boy in this exact same position, asleep in her lap. That's really sad. Okay. Next one. This one, again, the way she's cradling his head, but look at, she's also holding his hand. And it kind of has this element of motion, like she's just laid him down. She's brought him down from the cross, like we saw in some of Michelangelo's other two Pietas, and she's laying him, like she's in the process of laying him down. She's like leaning over him, holding his hand, and geez, it's just so sad. Anyway, I'm not gonna cry about it. This next one, I like that she's looking at his face. Some of the other ones, it is like she's sort of staring into the void. She's in that dissociative state. But this one and the previous one, she's looking directly at his face, and her veil kind of covers her face from everyone else, almost making this moment so much more private. Like, it's just her and her son, and she's cradling his head. And the thing that sticks out to me the most about this one is the state that Jesus is in. He's emaciated. Like, you can see his sternum and his ribs, and like the gash in his side isn't just like a pretty little cut, like it looks like it's gaping, and it just kind of shows more of the horror of what he suffered. And then to contrast with this beautiful gown she's wearing and this veil, and obviously this is an interpretation based on the time period of what she would be wearing if she had been a woman in the late Gothic era, not what they expected Mary to be wearing when this was actually occurring. But that contrast between him being in nothing, essentially, except for a little strap around his waist, and he's emaciated and he's bloody and he's dead, and she's holding him in her lap so carefully. Anyway, this one is another one. you can see the grief on her face in this one. And they've decided to demonstrate that through tears. Like, she actually has tears running down her face. But there is almost like a resignation to it. Again, she's not bent over him. She's not pulling him to her chest. She's just holding him in her lap and crying. Like, I mean, just devastating. And I think, and you know, like her arm wrapped all the way around him, holding him. Her hair being unbound is not like significant, but I think it's really unique to this picture or this sculpture. There's not a lot where her hair is freely flowing. So I really do like that as well. Just shows like a different side to her. And his head being slumped to the side. Like, I don't know, some of them are just very stiff, but this one really and his arm being draped the way it is just really shows like this guy's dead. And she's just mourning her son. Oh my gosh. This one, so to start with, just looking at her face, like the grief that you can see on her face, but it's like a resigned grief where she's looking at her son and she's not weeping, not overcome, but you can see how sad she is. And what really sticks out to me about this one is his lack of head. Obviously, we're going to discuss it. The fact that he no longer has a head. And this is something that is really special to me. Sculptures, the way that they are created to withstand time, because they're made out of stone and we expect stone and rock to last. And then when you have sculptures that don't, and almost in their erosion, they tell another story than what the artist originally intended. Like, the artist who made this one didn't intend for his head to fall off, obviously. Or, I don't know, maybe someone took his head off. They didn't intend for that to happen. But what has become, how it has transformed, it's transformed into this image of a woman who has held her son for so long in this one position that they turned to stone, and then for so long that stone eroded and her son's head fell off. And it's just so, I don't know. I'm sorry that I'm going to get emotional about that. But that is just like, she's going to hold her baby. Like, I'm sorry. She's going to do it. Okay. And the next one is kind of like the opposite. Her head has now come off. And we don't get to see how she feels about her son being dead. Not in her face. But we can see the way that she's holding on to him with the hand around his waist and the hand around his shoulders. Like, this one's more like she's clutching him to her body rather than just holding him in her lap. Like, it looks like she's pulling him in like this, as opposed to just like holding him. And I don't know. And she's clearly on the ground. She's not sitting. Some of these other ones look like she's sitting on something and holding him in her lap. But this one looks like she's on the ground and she's just holding him in whatever way that she can. And we don't get to see how she feels about it, but you can still feel that emotion. Yeah. And it almost also provides a little bit of anonymity in the sense that we know it's Mary and we know it's Jesus, but if you take off her head, it could be any woman. You know, it could be any woman holding their son who has died, or any woman holding the man that saved their soul from hell. And I think just something about that, she becomes the every woman in a sense. This one is okay. He is so small in this sculpture, and maybe that is like the artist wasn't good at proportions, or the rock wasn't big enough, whatever. But what it looks like to me is, from Mary's perspective, her holding her baby again, he looks fully grown. You know, he's got the long hair, the beard. He looks like he did when he died, but he's small again. He's small enough that she can hold him in her lap and cradle him like she used to do when he was little. And you can see the tears running down her face again. And it's this resignation, but still that grief of having witnessed her son die in such a horrific way. It's like, this is the savior of mankind. This is the Son of God, but that's also her baby boy. Like, that is her child. I cannot conceptualize the grief that she felt in that moment. And this one is kind of the exact opposite, where she is so much smaller than him. And he looks so big and so heavy, and yet still she's holding him in her lap. She's taken him down from the cross, or he's been taken down from the cross and laid in her lap, and he is so big and so heavy, and it must be such a burden to hold him. I mean, even when my cat, who is 20 pounds, sits on my legs for too long, they fall asleep, and it hurts. But she is just so small, and the way she's like has a hand over her heart, like she's feeling her own heartbeat, and then the hand on his wrist, like not feeling his heartbeat. Like, are you joking? Whoever made this needs to be locked up. This is so sad. Okay. I'm okay. Okay. This is the last sculpture because I can't handle anymore. But again, if you are interested in looking at more and knowing more about the history, the art history behind it, please check out that book. Okay, so that's the last of the Beatas, but we do have one more sculpture to look at. So this is the Virgin and Child in a niche, made in 1460 by Luca Pellerobia. And what really strikes me with this one is how young she looks. Like, she just looks really, really young, which we did discuss earlier might not have been the case, but I do really think that presenting her as so young, I mean, she could be in her early 20s in this sculpture. She could also be 14. I just think it kind of shows, I mean, it's period accurate. You know, women weren't having babies as late as we are now. You know, they were having babies when they were 14 or 15. It's the way it was. But I love the way that she's holding him so close to her and supporting him. And the way that she's holding his little foot. The way, I mean, how many times have you seen a baby and seen their little tiny fingers or their little tiny toes and just gone, and it's just like, that's her baby. That's her little boy. And of course she's going to squeeze his little toes because they're cute. And the way that he's like holding on to her, his arms are wrapped around her neck and he's holding on to her and their faces are pressed together, and it just like speaks of this bond, of this closeness between mother and son. And I love it. I love this one. It's a kind of a break from all the grief. Is just look at her and her little boy. She loves him. And it's cute. And then I said we were done with Beata, but I lied. Here's another one. So obviously it looks different because it's made out of a different stone. I think this one's alabaster. This is also from the 16th century, and it's Spanish. So it's not French, so it looks different. The thing that really stands out to me is this hand of hers that's like lifted. You know, what is she doing? Is she praying? Like, is she praying to God again with that like lifted hand? Is she praising him? Because again, she knew this was going to happen. She knew that her son was going to die. And is it this like effort of, you know, even in my sorrow, I'm going to praise, because what else is she supposed to do? And you see earlier when we read from Luke, you see her trust that she has in God about her son. But maybe she's also like holding her hand out, like to stop people from coming to him. Maybe there's guards coming to pick him up and take him to his tomb, or there's John or Mary or Nicodemus or the Joseph whose tomb that he uses, or ends up using. He doesn't do it, whatever. Maybe she's just like, you know, leave me alone, leave him alone, don't touch him. Like, and it's just, like, that's her, again, I'm going to say it again, that's her baby. And she's going to protect him. And like, she couldn't when he was on the cross, but she can protect his body. That's so sad. Okay. I think for real, that might be the last. Okay. That is the last of the sculptures. Now we're going to move on to the paintings. Before we begin, I am going to butcher most of the names of the people who made these paintings. I do apologize. I'll also include it up here so that you can read it, and hopefully that will be okay. We're also going to go from the oldest to the most recent paintings. I think the most recent painting being 2007 and the oldest being from about 1290. So we're going to start there. And that first painting we're starting with is the Madonna and Child by Duccio di Buninsegna. My Italian friends out there, please don't come for me in the comments. This painting was made between 1290 and 1300, and it is just a painting of Mary and baby Jesus, Madonna and the Child. This painting, she looks really sad. Like, I don't know if it's sadness or resignation, but just the way that she's like looking at him, she just looks sad. And he's like, the way his little hand is reaching up to brush her headpiece back, it's like he's trying to see her face more clearly, almost like he's trying to comfort her. And I think that's very sweet. And that's what I like about this one. And I also like the color of her gown. I think it's very beautiful. The next one is called The Lamentation of the Virgin, and this one was made in between 1418 and 1425. The original artist is unknown because it was found in a book called the Rohan Hours, and or the Rohan Masters, either one. It's multiple different names, but it's a book that's full of art and hymns and poetry and songs and stuff, and there isn't currently an artist or an author attributed to this piece. But what we see here is Mary in complete devastation. This is such a different depiction from what we usually see of her, where she's kind of resigned or very somber and solemn in her grief. But here we see a woman who is being dragged away from the dead body of her son, and she's like, she looks almost dead herself. Like, she's still reaching for him. And you can imagine, like, John, who is the apostle behind her, pulling her away, and like all of that weight that he has to carry because she's just like still trying to reach her son as he lays dead on the ground. And I think this, like, deviating so much from how we usually see Mary, it's just so real, and it's really very sad. Next, we have the Miraflores altarpiece, which was created sometime between 1442 and 1445 in the Netherlands. It has several other names. It's also called the Triptych of the Virgin, or the Altar of Our Lady, or the Mary altarpiece, and it was made by Rogier van der Weyden. So we have that. So we have 3 different depictions of Mary. Obviously it's Mary and the baby Jesus after he was born, and then Jesus and Mary after he's come down from the cross with Nicodemus, Joseph, John, whoever these people are. And then you have Jesus returning to Mary after he's been resurrected. And I think Jesus being in the same position in panels 1 and panel 2, the point that I was trying to make about him being in the same position as he was as a baby and then as a grown man and dead in her arms, and the way that she's holding him to her in panel 2, and like her face is pressed against his, like just trying to be close to him. You know, there isn't that resignation that you see in some of the sculptures. Like, you can see her grief, and you can see like her mourning and her mourning her son. And then in the 3rd panel, the way she almost looks like afraid of him. You know, she's still in mourning. It's only been 3 days since her son has died, and he's back, and she kind of looks like she's in shock at seeing him. And I also like that in that 3rd panel, he's wearing the same color that she was in the 2nd. I just think that's very beautiful. So I do like that. All right, let's go on to the next one, which is called The Small Madonna and Child. And this one was made by Martin Schongauer, who's German, between 1470 and 1491. And I like this one because she looks so young in this one, in this like particular one. Just, I don't know, she just looks so young, and she's like looking at him, not grieved like some of the other ones where it's her and him as a baby, but with just so much love. And I really do love that. I've been loving that. So this one kind of is a deviance from what I've looked at so far. And this one is the Madonna and the Child enthroned. And this one was done by Carlo Crivelli in 1472. And I chose this one because it's a very different depiction of Mary. She has a very cold expression on her face. It almost looks like she's like sneering. I don't know, maybe that's a misinterpretation. And it's not like a full, like, she's barely touching her baby. Like, she's like literally holding him like this with like one finger and then this one finger. Again, very different. She's also incredibly dripped out. Like, she's wearing gold and green, and she's sitting on a throne, and her baby's wearing gold, and it's a very different depiction of her than we get in the scripture, which is of a poor woman who gave birth in a stable and had to lay her baby to rest in a manger. This is like a version of Mary that's almost untouchable. Like, she's not approachable. She is not relatable. She's not the every woman. You can't look at Mary and be like, that's someone that I can relate to. She almost looks like she's judging you. She's almost looking down at you. And you're not like her. You're not like Mary. You can't be like Mary. And that's kind of the vibe that this one is giving, which is so different from how she's often represented, which is just why I wanted to include it as just another option. She almost also doesn't really seem to care about her child as much as some of the other ones, which I think is interesting. This is another one called Madonna and Child by Gian Pietrino, 1510. I love how carefully she's holding him. You know, she's just cradling his little bum and his little back, just holding him close. And the way that he touches her chin so, like, gently, in a way that is, like, speaks to more consciousness than a baby of that age should. You know, babies like to grip and they like to grab because, I don't know, they do. That's what they do. But he's just touching her so carefully. Both her chin and her wrist. And they're both looking, like, directly at the person who's witnessing the painting. It's so different from the one before, how Mary is kind of looking down at you, and, you know, the baby isn't even looking at you. But this one, they're both looking at you, and it's not this, like, condemnation or judgment. It's just, they're kind of inviting you into this little family. I don't know. I really like this one. The next one is Standing Madonna in Mourning from 1520. This one's by monogrammist GZ, who is German. She's very alone in this picture. We do see her, like, a lot of times grieving Jesus on her own, but there's no one else in frame, not even Jesus. And, like, the downcast, like, she's looking down and her hood is, like, covering her face and her hands are tucked in, like she's cold or, like, making herself smaller. And somehow the back of it is even sadder, and because you can't even see her face, like, she's gone. And it kind of is giving Grim Reaper a little bit. When are we getting a Grim Reaper who is a mother? Like, when are we getting that? I don't know. Yeah, I really like how this one represents her. You know, her husband is gone. Her kids are nowhere to be seen. Her son is dead. Her other children, I should say, are nowhere to be seen. Not even John is here, and she's just alone in her mourning and in her grief. So this next one is The Virgin with the Child and St. Anne, or The Virgin and Child with St. Anne. This one's Leonardo da Vinci, 1510. The way that Mary is looking at her son with so much, like, endearment, and she reaches to, like, grab him and pull him into her lap. And you also have St. Anne, which I believe people think is Mary's mom. I can't confirm, but she's also sitting in St. Anne's lap. And so there's kind of like this lineage going on here. Grandmother, mother, son. And she's reaching for him to pull him back into her lap, and he's, like, smiling at her. And this image of him wrestling with a lamb, him being the lamb, he is the sacrificial lamb that is going to save the world, and he's wrestling with this image of what he is, if that makes sense. And she's trying to pull him away from it. What mother wouldn't want to prevent her son from dying in the way that she knows that he has to die? So even in this, like, tenderness and this care, she's pulling him back. Maybe it's like, not yet, like, this is too soon, or I don't want you to ever have to suffer like that. No mother ever wants their child to have to suffer like that. So this is the Madonna and the Child with St. John. This one is from 1529 or 1530 by Jacopo Carucci. We'll see. I just think that she looks so motherly in this one, the way that she's cradling both Jesus and John, who is her nephew. She's very careful with them. And then Jesus is also embracing John, and John is also embracing Jesus. And it's just this like little family, and her cheek against her nephew's forehead. I don't know, just holding her boys. I think that's so sweet. And just speaks of her affection. Like, John isn't her son, John's her nephew, but she's still holding him with such tenderness and such care. This one is Studies for a Rest on the Flight into Egypt by Rutilio Manetti, who is Italian, and it was made between 1571 and 1639. I really love like the rough sketches. Some of the like really popular paintings that we've seen today and then also in other times, I always find myself drawn to the sketches that were done ahead of time. There's something just rougher about it, and it makes it almost more raw to me. I love her little halo. I think it's so cute. Her head on his back as she's like keeping him steady while she feeds him. It's just such a motherly thing. And also I love his chubby little legs. They're so cute. And she's just resting as she's trying to save her son from impending doom because the king wants to kill him. And yet here's this tender moment that we get to see her just feeding him. Anyway, that's very sweet. The Madonna and Child with a Bird. This was done by Simone Cantarini between 1635 and 1636, who is an Italian artist. She looks just really tired in this picture. Like, what mother of a young child is not tired? She's looking down at her baby, and you're just kind of left, is she thinking about how tired she is? Is she thinking like a lot of those motherly thoughts of, am I doing enough? Am I doing well? Is he gonna be okay? Like all those very typical mother things that you think when you're holding a thing that relies on you entirely for their well-being. But she could also maybe be thinking about his death, his fate, his future that she knows is coming for him. And I wonder if when she's looking at her innocent little baby, if part of her sees later the son that she has who will be dead. You know, if that makes sense. You know, that's just her baby. Maybe she's even not looking at his face. Maybe her eyes are closed. Maybe she's praying. Maybe she's asleep. Either way, she's holding her son and she's caring for him. And I think that's very, very special, very sweet. This next one is another one of the Lamentations. This is Christ on the cross with the Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene, and Saint John. The way she holds onto his feet, I'm assuming that she is the one who's on, like, kneeling on the floor. She's holding onto his feet because it's the only part that she can reach. You know, maybe she's just overcome with grief and she can't stand, and so she can't reach for him. She's on her knees, maybe praying, maybe just weeping and holding on to the only part of him that she can touch. She is like, her head is bent down. The other two, Mary and John, are looking up at his face, but she can't. Like, her head is bent down. She can't look at his face. And I love the character. I don't know if it's John or Mary. It's kind of hard to say. I think it might be Mary. Mary Magdalene is holding her hand. And I just think that's really sweet. This one, The Virgin Comforter, was done in 1875 by William Adolphe Bouguereau. And this one, you know, you have this woman who is clearly mourning over her small child who has died, and who better to comfort her than a woman who has experienced the same thing, you know, who has maybe not experienced the death of a small child, but experienced the death of her son. She certainly has, and she's clearly in anguish as she like bends herself over Mary's lap, and Mary appears to be praying for her, praying for the boy. Either way, she's acting as a comfort to this poor grieving woman. This is a painting of the Pietà, which doesn't happen as often, I guess, as sculptures. It's done by Gustave Moreau in 1876. This one is just so dark, and I love that because a lot of them paint this scene with a lot of light surrounding them. There is light coming from the dove which typically represents the Holy Spirit, and there's light coming from Jesus. But even Mary is incredibly dark in this. Her blue robes are kind of seen coming from his side, almost like the water that spilled from his side. But her robe is also dotted with his blood that's currently spilling out of the wound in his side. And I think that's something that you miss in a lot of the sculptures, is how bloody he would have been. And so when she is holding him, how bloody she would have become. She would have been covered in his blood and in the water that's coming from his side. And she's like kind of moving her veil out of her face, sort of like you would, move your bangs or whatever, so that she can look at him, so that there's nothing obscuring her vision from the sight of her son that she's holding in her lap. Now we have one of my favorite ones. This is the angels entertaining the Holy Child. And this one's done by Mary Ann Stokes in 1887, or somewhere between 1887 and 1893. This is one of the few that I found that were painted by a woman. Mary Ann Stokes never had any children, but it's still such a different representation from what like a man might think. I just think the fact that Mary is passed out, she is asleep. She's so asleep, her cheek is like pressed up against the hay, kind of like this. She's trusting her child with the care of these angels, or with herself, like the baby starts crying, she's going to wake up. But she's taking this moment to rest. And you can, again, see how young she looks. And it's so humanizing. She wasn't some deity. She wasn't some magical lady who just knew how to raise a son and be not tired and not exhausted just because he was the Son of God and the Savior of the world. She was still human. She was still very human. I also like that he's looking at the audience again, like he's staring right at you, and she's just passed out. She's sleepy. Joseph, what are you doing? What's he doing? This is Madonna and Child and Little St. John. I like this one because I should tell you, Robert Lofton Newman, one of the first Americans, slay. This was done in 1894. I just really love that you can't really see their faces. It makes it abstract. And I always just like abstract work. He's sitting on her lap, she's holding him, talking to John. I love John's little walking stick. I don't know. I like this one a lot. It's also very dark compared to some of the other ones. So these next two, the Annunciation, this was done in 1898 by Henry Ossawa Tanner. And this is that moment when the angel comes to tell Mary about the fact that she's pregnant and she has a baby, or she's going to have a baby, and it's going to be the Son of God, and all of that. And the way she's like curved in on herself, she's clearly terrified. I don't think there's a single time in scripture, could be wrong, but I don't think there's a single time in scripture when someone comes face to face with an angel and isn't terrified. And she's a young girl or a young woman alone, and she's unmarried. She's being told that she's pregnant or going to be pregnant. And that must be terrifying. And you can see in her face, like, she's not scared in the sense of she's going to run away, but there's a dread there. Especially, she would have known the expectation for what the Messiah was going to be. She would have known that her son, if he was the Messiah, if he was exactly what this angel said he was going to be, that he was going to die. And you can see the way that her hands are like clasped together, and there's like such tension in the way that she's so rigid. And I equally love the study for the Annunciation because she looks even smaller. Like, she looks even more terrified somehow when she doesn't have a face and you can barely see her hands. And it almost, I don't know, there's something about this study that is just so, I guess maybe it's the abstractness that I love. But yeah, that one really stuck out to me when I was doing research for this. The next is The Lamentation of Christ, 1897. I'm really gonna butcher this because it's I believe it's Turkish, but Bela Chikos Sezaja, forgive me, please. I'm assuming that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the one on top, and then the one below is probably Mary Magdalene. I like the way that you can tell she's like stroking his head, caressing him, whispering to him. She holds him so close, like if he was gonna breathe again, she would be the first one to know. Like that's how close she is to him. She could be whispering something to him. Maybe it's a lullaby, something she said to him before. It looks like her eyes are closed and there's just so much grief in her face. Maybe she's praying. Maybe she's just in silent mourning. It's just so devastating to think about. We have another one by Henry Ossawa Tanner, Mary. This one was made in 1914. And the context of this one was this is the same year that his mother died. And I do wonder if that played into how he presents Mary, is his relationship with his own mother. It's another really dark one. It's another one where Mary is alone. It's the same room as in the Annunciation, the same little like bed in the corner. It's just like flipped perspective. And she's still sitting in the corner and she's alone except for this one little candlelight, and it's at the same level as where her abdomen is. So you wonder, is that like a representation of Jesus in her womb, or is it just like that symbol of being light in the darkness, that what she's going to bring into the world is going to save the world? Like what does that represent? And she's still looking into this corner, like where the angel had been. Maybe like she's looking for another message, another explanation, someone, I don't know. She just looks very alone, but she's not like curled up like she was in the last one. She's more open. Her shoulders seem to be more set back, like her hand is put against the bed, like she might move. I don't know. I really love that one. And then we have the War Pietà, which was done by Max Ginsberg in 2007. And this is one that people might be familiar with. It's not exactly a Pietà in the same way that it's not Mary and Jesus. It is a mother and grieving her dead son who was killed during the war. But it's using that imagery of Mary and Jesus to represent like the grief, a mother's grief when her child is killed. And this one, they don't go for the solemn, resigned, like almost disassociation. Like she's grieving openly. And I think that's so beautiful. And she's wearing like the clothes that you would expect to see Mary in. And that kind of points to, like, I guess my thesis of the Mary segment, which is that she is kind of that representation for all women who are mothers, and women in general, I think, but specifically women who are mothers, and specifically women who have lost a child, and like how much comfort can come from like looking at a woman like that who is revered and she is seen as blessed by God, and yet she has known grief like so many other women in the world. It is still the same, it's the same grief, and being able to represent that in art and then use that imagery to, I don't know, help cope and comfort others, I think that's very beautiful. And I think that's what makes her so important as a person and as someone represented in different kinds of media. So now we're going to talk about prayers and hymns that were written for Mary. And the first one we're going to talk about is the earliest known hymn to Mary, which was dated at its earliest to the 3rd century BCE? No, CE, AD. And there is some dispute about that, but and it's used in the Roman Catholic Church and the Anglican Communion and Eastern Orthodox churches, and in Coptic Orthodox Christmas liturgy. That's where it's found. The earliest was the Coptic Orthodox Christmas liturgy, which I think is really cute. So it was also found in a Gregorian chant book of Jerusalem, but I couldn't find that text because it was behind a paywall. Ask me how I feel about academia being behind a paywall. Ask me how I feel about that. Okay, so there are several different translations. There's a Greek text, a Slavonic text, 2 different Slavonic texts, and a Latin text, which is derived from the Greek, and it's an 11th century translation. And I'm just going to read you, there are 4 different English translations, and so I'm just going to read you the 4 different ones. The English translation of the Greek text says, "Beneath thy compassion we take refuge, O Theotokos. Do not despise our petitions in time of trouble, but rescue us from dangers, only pure one, only blessed one." And Theotokos means God-bearer. Just so you know, I think that's kind of a middle name. Then the English translation of the first Church Slavonic text is, "Beneath thy mercy we take refuge, O Virgin Theotokos. Disdain not our supplications or our distress, but deliver us from perils, only pure and blessed one." And then the second English translation for the alternative Slavonic version is, "Beneath thy tenderness of heart we take refuge, O Theotokos. Disdain not our supplications and our necessity, but deliver us from perils, only pure and blessed one." And then the English translation of the Latin text, "We fly to thy protection, O Holy Mother of God. Do not despise our petitions and our necessities, but deliver us always from all dangers, O glorious and blessed Virgin." And it's from the Latin text that you get the name of this hymn, which is Sub Tuum Praesidium, which is "We fly to thy protection," and sometimes it's called "Under your protection." I think that's based off of the Greek. I just think it's interesting that this hymn is so old, but also the referencing of Mary as like a protector, and talking about her compassion and her mercy and her tenderness of heart, as the mother of God, as the God bearer. I don't think God would have bestowed his own son upon a woman who was not compassionate, merciful, and tender of heart. So there's that. I don't really have a lot to say about it. I just wanted to read some of that to you. And it's this next one that I'm also not going to spend a whole lot of time on, just because it kind of verges into a little bit more veneration of Mary territory, which is not something I would say that I fully understand. But I just wanted to share some parts of this and then just discuss the difference I feel like between what is represented here in this hymn and what we see in her imagery, and then also in the Bible itself. So this is what is it called? It's the Akathist hymn, or the Akathist hymn, which is used, I think, in Roman Catholic liturgical use, and possibly Eastern Orthodox. It was attributed to a saint in Constantinople. So approximately 530 CE, AD. It's very long. I'm not going to read all of it. So this is a section in the 3rd ode that says, "Hail, O Lady, unique gateway, through whom the Lord alone has passed. Hail, you who through your maternity have shattered the locks of Hades. Hail, divine access towards salvation for the saved. O you so perfectly worthy of our praise." And then there's another section in the 4th ode that glorifies Jesus. And then we have, "O most holy Theotokos, save us. With faith we raise our voices in melodious hymns to you who are worthy of all praise. Hail, fertile mountain, raised aloft by the Spirit. Hail, lighthouse. Hail, vessel containing the manna. O you so sweet to the taste of pious men. Hail, Immaculate Lady, who have brought pardon to the world. Hail, O ladder, who through grace have lifted us from the earth. Hail, O bridge, who in truth do lead from death to life all those who sing your praise. Hail, O pure one, more lofty than the heavens. Hail, for without pain you have borne within your womb the foundation of the earth. Hail, O Lady, true mother of the lawgiver, who granted pardon to those who broke his law. Hail, O Lady, unfathomable depth, inaccessible summit, O ever virgin, through whom we have been made divine." And so that's just a little bit from the 3rd and 4th ode. It's a long one. There is an element to this hymn that is, I think, pretty clearly deifying Mary. I mean, if we just go back, "Hail, Immaculate Lady, who have brought pardon to the world. O ladder, who through grace have lifted us from the earth. O Lady, unfathomable depth, inaccessible summit, through whom we have been made divine." It just feels like a lot of what Jesus came to do is being attributed to her because she bore him, which is an interesting thing to point out in the relationship between a mother and son, obviously, and how much can we attribute who men are and who they become to their mothers, which is something we will actually, I think, talk about a lot, is how mothers shape their children. This is obviously kind of a different situation because Jesus was already, anyway, obviously we're not getting into the theology of it, but it feels more like that image that we looked at, the Madonna and Child Enthroned, where she is this other thing who is not human. She's not like us. She is something extra, something special, and that's why she was able to give birth to Jesus. That's why God chose her to give birth to Jesus. And I don't know if I see that in the scripture, and it also is it's just a different representation of Mary. Yeah, I just think that version of Mary that we have, who is a comforter to women who have lost their children, or, the tender and loving woman who holds baby Jesus and John, her nephew, or who grieves over her son and holds him close to her, it feels very different than this almost godlike version of her that it seems like we're looking at in this Akathist hymn. I could be wrong. I could be misinterpreting it. But that is sort of how I see that. And now I want to talk about Hellfire from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Specifically, the stage version, because I love it a lot. Patrick Page, who's also done Hades and Hadestown, he's phenomenal. He is phenomenal. I mean, everyone, obviously the guy who did it in the Disney movie is also great, but Patrick Page eats down. And I do have to confess, I did say that it said Beata Maria. It does not. It's Beata Maria. Stupid. Which is a completely different thing, obviously. What does it mean? Let me look that up really quick. Blessed. Okay. So, Beata means blessed. And the Beata, I think, or Piata. Maybe it's Piata. Is it Piata? Someone want to tell me if it's Piata? I think that's probably what it is. Pity. That's what I thought. Okay. So, Beata means blessed, and the Peata is the pity. So, it's the pity of Mary. So, in Hellfire, I guess the plot of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, really quickly, is that there is a archbishop of Notre Dame, the place in Paris that a lot of people, it's a giant church. It's a very popular, very big church. And the archdeacon, his name is Frollo, Judge Claude Frollo, and he adopts his brother's son, Quasimodo, who is deformed from birth, and he keeps him locked in a tower. And there is a woman whose name is Esmeralda, and she is Romani, and she is beautiful. They're all in love with her, and by they I mean Quasimodo, Phoebus, and Judge Claude Frollo, but it lusts after her. It's not love, obviously. And Hellfire is his prayer, and it's very interesting that he chooses to pray to Mary. Part of that could be because he's in Notre Dame, which is named after Mary. What he is essentially praying in this song is, I'm better than everyone. I'm so much purer than the common, vulgar, weak, licentious crowd. Like, this is the stuff he's saying. But then he's like, so why am I lusting after her? Why do I want her so much? What he says, I think, is actually really interesting. This burning desire is turning me to sin, and not that the desire in itself is sinful, which is very interesting how he views himself, and then also how he views his sin in relation to her. And then he goes on to say, it's not my fault. I'm not to blame. Interesting, right? Interesting. And he's saying this to a statue of Mary. Mary, the mother of God, who probably could not care less, frankly. Anyway, it's not my fault. I think God's plan, he made the devil so much stronger than the man. And in the background, the choir is saying, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, which I'm pretty sure means through my fault. So, the choir, I think, is telling him, brother, it's you. Brother, it's your fault. And so then Frollo says, protect me, Maria. Don't let this siren cast her spell. Don't let her fire sear my flesh and bone. Mind you, Esmeralda could not care one lick for this man. She actually despises him, hates him. If she was going to cast a spell on him, it would be to set him on fire. Anyway, choose me or your pyre, be mine or you will burn. Kyrie eleison, which is Lord have mercy. And so he's saying, God have mercy on her. God have mercy on me. Anyway, specifically what I wanted to talk about with this one is there is a staged version where instead of a prop statue, they use an actual woman like as the statue. So it's a woman holding a baby and she's pretending to be the statue of Mary.
I see her, the sun comes in a raven air, is blazing in the outward.
Oh my gosh. And you can see in her face as she's listening to this man who is self-righteous, incredibly self-righteous, who believes that he is the pinnacle of all man, even though he is the worst. But because he does all the things that he's supposed to do, and no one knows about all the things he's not supposed to do that he does, he thinks he's like the best. As he's on his knees begging Mary, the mother of God, to save him from this lady, who's like 16, by the way, I think in the books, in case you were wondering, to protect his soul, to make her fall in love with him so that he can be with her, or so he can set her on fire. Okay, and the actress who plays Mary in this scene, she's just like weeping. Because no, she's not gonna do that. Like, I just think it's so funny, especially considering, so we're just pulling all the versions in here. In the movie, Quasimodo is not his nephew. Quasimodo is the son of another Romani woman that Judge Claude Frollo killed. He killed her while she had her baby in her arms. So consider if that was the context. He kills a woman and then takes her son and abuses her son for years. And then he goes and he prays to Mary, the mother of God, about killing another woman so that his soul isn't damned to hell because he can't handle his own emotions. Like, the fact that he wasn't struck dead by lightning is impressive. It's kind of impressive. But sometimes I'll watch that video and it's just so, like, gutting. They ate with that. They really did. And I think there was something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, there was, because in the movie, again, when Esmeralda is singing God Help the Outcasts, a very popular song, she has sought sanctuary in Notre Dame because Judge Claude Frollo sent soldiers after her. And there was a time when you could be a criminal and ask for sanctuary in a church and then no one could touch you. And I'm not saying that she was a criminal, but like if there was someone in the law trying to get you for whatever reason it was, you could take sanctuary in a church and you were untouchable, essentially. So that's what she's done, and now she's standing in this church, this beautiful, pristine chapel, and she's looking at another statue. It's a different statue of Mary holding baby Jesus. And she starts singing this song. I don't know if they include that in the stage version of her singing because of the statue that she's seen of Mary and of baby Jesus. But like, to think about that, in that context, that you have this woman who is pleading for not help for herself, but help for her people. And then to this statue, and she's not asking Mary for help, but Mary, if we want to go with a real human being is playing the statue of Mary. Mary is witnessing it, holding her baby, witnessing this woman plead before God for help for her people. And then I think it's maybe 3 songs later, Judge Claude Frollo, who pretends he's so righteous and good when they all know he isn't, doing the opposite. He's pleading for the death of another woman who is innocent because he can't handle his own sin. And we're talking about Mary, the mother of God. Like, what? Okay, so I had to talk about that. I don't know if it was really relevant or important, but I wanted to talk about it. And that is the end of our segment on Mary. I hope I kind of got across what I was hoping to get across. And she'll probably be brought up at other times because she is sort of the pinnacle, the mother from which all other mothers flow, if that makes sense. And I'll probably reference her and maybe cry about her again. Yeah, I mean, she's the ultimate good mother and also the ultimate tragic mother because she knew from the moment that her son was born that he was going to die, which is devastating, but she knew. And she loved her son and she raised him well. I think that's the end of that segment. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any comments, let me know. But we are going to move on to Aelswith and the Last Kingdom. Hi, welcome back to me. Actually, welcome back to me. You've been here. You're still here. Set change, costume change. We're on a new day. I didn't have time to finish filming this yesterday, so I'm filming it today in a different place. Something that I didn't realize yesterday is that I was filming all that on Good Friday. Some of those things that I was talking about happened 2,000 years ago, yesterday. How crazy. Anyway, now we're here to talk about Aelswith. We're leaving Mary behind us. Maybe. We might mention her. We might bring her up again. But we're going to talk about the Last Kingdom now. And we're going to talk about specifically Aelswith, who is the wife of King Alfred the Great of Wessex. Not England yet. This is prior to England existing. We've just got several kingdoms on the island of Britain, I guess. I don't even know if it was called that. One of them being Wessex. And they're run by the Saxons, Christian Saxons. And we're going to look at the wife of one of the great kings, Alfred. Okay, so who is Aelswith? In the first Last Kingdom book, The Last Kingdom, we are introduced to Aelswith. She is the sister of Ethelred, one of the many Ethelreds of Mercia. She is therefore, I think, Uhtred, who is the main character of the series, I think she is his aunt, I believe. This is what it says. It says, I found another uncle, this one called Ealdorman Ethelred, son of Ethelred, brother of Ethelwulf, father of Ethelred, and brother to another Ethelred, who had been the father of Aelswith, who was married to Alfred. And Ealdorman Ethelred, with his confusing family, grudgingly acknowledged me as a nephew. So somewhere in all of those Ethelreds and Ethelwulfs and brothers and fathers is Uhtred's mother, and also in there is Aelswith. Aelswith welcomed me, speaking in the distinctive tones of a Mercian, and after she had inquired about my parentage, she told me we had to be related because her father was Ethelred, who had been ealdorman in Mercia, and he was first cousin to the late lamented Ethelwulf, whose body I had seen outside Redingham. So she is born into nobility, and then she goes on to marry the king of Wessex. Well, when she married him, he wasn't the king of Wessex. He was just the king of Wessex's brother. And Aelswith is described as being a small woman with mouse brown hair, small eyes, a small mouth, and a very determined chin. She's always wearing very modest clothing, but elegant for the time, I would suppose. She's very devout. She's very pious. She believes herself to be very holy. Afterward, he took us to a nearby hall where we were introduced to Aelswith, Alfred's wife, who was attended by a dozen women, 3 of them nuns, and guarded by a score of heavily armed men. So, Aelswith. She marries Alfred, as we've discussed. But Alfred, in his early days, in his youth, was a very promiscuous man. He was having babies outside of wedlock. And when we first meet Alfred, he's actually begging for forgiveness from both the Lord and Father Beocca, who is his personal priest and advisor in the first couple of books. And he is begging for forgiveness because he's just slept with another girl. He's done it again. And this is when Uhtred is 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And this is his first introduction. And so this is our first introduction. And this is also in the Last Kingdom book, the first one. And this is before we've ever met Aelswith. We don't meet Aelswith until later. But this is what we already know about her, in a sense, based on what we know about Alfred. And at one point Alfred says, "I should never have married, father. I should have joined the church, gone to a monastery." And this is because he's sleeping around. But at this point, we know that he's already married. And later we find out, after Alfred becomes king, the year was 871. I did not know it then, but Alfred's wife had just given birth to a daughter he named Ethelfled. When we first meet Aelswith for real in the text is when Uhtred and his friend Breda are really young. They're both, at this point, they're both Saxons and they're both slaves of the Dane Ragnar. But they both don't have a problem with it. They really like Ragnar. They hate the Saxons. They hate the Christians. They're both Breda and Uhtred are perfectly fine where they're at. But they get essentially kidnapped by Beocca and taken to Alfred and then Aelswith, and that's when they meet Aelswith. And they have that whole discussion about her parentage and his parentage and how they're both Mercian as well, and they're probably related. And then she goes on to talk to Breda, and Breda comes up with a lie that she is the bastard daughter of a King Edmund who had just died, that they just killed him, or he died, I don't really exactly remember. And Aelswith, because she learns or believes that Breda is a bastard, immediately hates her, because Aelswith knows that her husband has been unfaithful and her husband has at least one bastard child. And it is said in the text that, I think it's much later, but it is said that Aelswith actively prevents Alfred from seeing Aelswith, his bastard son, but not the woman that he cheated on her with. Alfred was taking care of her, but he was not allowed to see Aelswith at all, which I think is very interesting, that her anger is not towards the woman or her husband, but towards the child. And we see that here again, where Breda isn't even Alfred's bastard child, but Aelswith hates her anyway. And that hatred actually extends all the way into the 6th book, which is when we last see Aelswith, and she still hates her because she believed that she was a bastard. And also Breda exudes a lot of Danishness, even not being a Dane. She very much accepted the world of paganism. She becomes I don't know the proper word for it, but essentially a witch. She communicates with the gods and she does all the curses and the hexes and all that. So that's kind of our first impression of Aelswith, is this noble, pious, grumpy, bigoted woman who just has a lot of hatred in her heart. And part of that is because of the betrayal, the very early betrayal of her husband, that she can't hate him for because it's her husband and he's the king. But she takes that hatred out, especially on the children. And will that have an effect on how she is as a mother? I guess we'll have to see. Aelswith is also not a very typical kind of woman. She is non-submissive, even though I think she would like to pretend that she is. That will come up as a point that is important later, and I'm only mentioning it because it does become important. She is known for intervening when her husband is speaking and coming up with plans. She wants to put her ideas in as well, which personally I think is great. I'm glad that she does that. Aelswith is the kind of woman who makes room for only herself, if that makes sense. So if there's this time period isn't very friendly to women. They're not allowed to speak or show any kind of sense of personality, essentially, or any kind of dissonance with the culture, with their husbands, with their fathers. It's just not, there's no space for them to do so. And Aelswith makes space for only herself. And then she closes the door behind her so she cannot allow any other woman to come in after her, including her own daughter. And we see this in other female characters who grow up in a patriarchal society. I think very distinctly of Alicent Hightower from the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. She is very much like this. And when she was married to King Viserys and he was super sick, she kind of stepped into that role, but then immediately shut the door behind her so that no other woman could do that after her. It wasn't about... Anyway, that's a side note, but Aelswith very much has that kind of personality. Aelswith also wants to be queen, and that is something that's brought up almost every time that she's brought up. She wants to be queen, but she's not allowed to be queen. Uhtred is talking to a Dane at one point, and the Dane refers to her as Queen Aelswith, and he says, "No, queen," I said, "the West Saxons won't have queens. She's merely the king's wife." "She's a weasel pretending to be a thrush," Brita said. So now we know who Aelswith is. Let's talk about her as a mother. So we know that she is Catholic. They all are, other than the Danes, obviously. The Saxons are Catholic. She is very Catholic. She is described as a domineering, very stern, firm woman. When Uhtred first meets Ethelfled, who is Aelswith's eldest child and her first daughter, Ethelfled is petting a dog whose name is Nightganga, which I just think is an epic name. I also remember how Ethelfled ran over to Nightganga and fondled him, and Aelswith called her back. "Dirty dog," she told her daughter, "you'll get fleas, or worse. Come here." So what we see from Ethelfled, and I think in this scene, that she is a very stern mother, and any kind of enjoyment or childhood fun just isn't what you're supposed to do. Kids want to pet dogs, that's just the truth of it, and that is just not what Aelswith is gonna let her daughter do. And whether that is because she is noble and part of the nobility and she thinks that's below her child, or she actually thinks that the dog will get her daughter sick, maybe it is a protection thing, but the way that she speaks to her daughter about the dog is very clearly, there's not you don't feel this warmth of compassion. And that's sort of our first interaction with her as a mother. And then we skip to the second book. There's a lot that goes on in the second book, but at one point, about halfway through, the Danes come and they sack Winchester, and they send pretty much the entire royal family and everyone in Winchester, just scatter them. And Alfred and his family end up in a swamp. And there, Uhtred and his little gaggle, which is Leofric, Ainfled, who is a woman that they saved from the Danes, and Iseult, who is his little side piece at the time, and who is a queen. She was a queen in Wales, but he took her away from there because the guy that she was with sucked. And also he thought she was pretty. So anyway, that's Iseult, who's great. Well, I don't really like her in the TV show. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So they arrive in the swamp where they find the king and his wife. And this is kind of a divergence between the book and the TV show. In the book, Aelswith only has Ethelfled and Edward, just her two children. Edward being the firstborn son, but the second-born child. In the books, she does have those two, and Edward is about 2 or 3 years old, and she's pregnant with another child. But in the TV show, Edward is just a baby. And so when they arrive and they find Aelswith, and she's described as looking ragged, her greasy hair tangled, her belly swollen, and her clothes filthy. Later, we learn that Edward is very sick, and it was evident now that he was dying. An extraordinary, hollow, racking sound from such a small child, and all of us lay awake, dreading the next bout, flinching from the desperate rasping sound, and when the coughing fits ended, we feared they would not start again. Every silence was like the coming of death, yet somehow the small boy lived, clinging on through those cold, wet days in the swamp. So Edward continues to ail, while Uhtred and Alfred are trying to figure out how to get him back to the capital. Iseult is also pagan, and she does know how to use magic. We see her making something for Alfred. He has a stomach issue, and she makes this like food that he can actually eat, and so they think she's a witch because of that, and she's like, girl, I just grew this out of the ground, this is just normal. But then she is also like, well, I also can heal your son, like you can do magic and I can do that. But Aelswith hates pagans. She hates them all. She thinks any kind of witchcraft is evil and wicked and should not be done, but she is desperate because her son is dying, and that's just something that she's struggling with. And this is a through thread between both the book and the TV show. Aelswith did not want Edward to go. She wanted him cured, but when I said Iseult insisted on working her charms alone, Aelswith wailed that she did not want her son to die apart from his mother. Her crying upset Edward, who began to cough again. Ainfled stroked his forehead. Can she do it? She demanded of me. Ainfled took hold of Aelswith's shoulders. Let the boy go, my lady. Let him go. He'll die. Let him go, Ainfled said, and Aelswith collapsed into the whore's arms, and I picked up Alfred's son, who felt as light as a feather that had not cured him. That was about some Christian magic that they tried to do, because that's okay. Christian magic is fine, but Iseult's magic is not fine. You can just see Aelswith struggling with like the potential loss of her son. And what's interesting in the book about having Ainfled be this person who is here for Aelswith, one, it said in that scene that she is a whore. And I am not saying that word in like the derogatory sense. That is the word that they use for these women who, sex workers, that's what we say now. Whore is just what they called them. But it's interesting, because of her station compared to Aelswith's station. A whore comforting a woman who is essentially the queen of Wessex is like beyond comprehension. But similarly, earlier when we first meet Ainfled, we learned that she had several children. And when Leofric, who is one of Uhtred's friends, he's just like a guy, asks her about her children, Ainfled says, they died. Ainfled said harshly, that's what children do, they die. And that's just something that I think about a lot when it comes to women in this time period, and women like pre-modern medicine, like very modern medicine, just how like disconnected from your own children you probably had to be just to be able to survive, because so many of them would die. So the fact that when Iseult is coming for her son, for Aelswith's son, for Edward, Ainfled is the one demanding from Uhtred, like, is he going to make it? Is he going to survive? And Ainfled is the one who is then telling Aelswith to let him go, because it's the only way to save him. And what mother doesn't want to save their son, essentially. Iseult takes Edward, and she saves his life. We don't really know that yet. And so there's a conversation between Uhtred and Alfred. And Alfred is saying, shall I fetch him? Meaning his son. No, Uhtred says. His mother, Alfred began, must wait till morning, Lord. What can I tell her? That her son is not coughing, Lord. Aelswith screamed that Edward was dead, but Ainfled and Alfred calmed her, and we all waited, and still there was silence, and in the end I fell asleep. I went to the door of Leofric's shelter, and saw Aelswith watching from her doorway. She looked desperate, like a mother about to hear that her child had died, and there was nothing but silence from Iseult's hut. And Aelswith began to weep, the terrible tears of a bereaved mother, and then there was a strange sound, a child's laughter, and a heartbeat later, Edward, still naked as an egg, and all muddy from his rebirth through the earth passage, ran from Iseult's hut and went to his mother. And so we can see in this passage, in this section, I guess, that Aelswith is not a very, emotional, sentimental mother, but she loves her son. She loves her son, and she does not want him to die. There is another passage that talks about Ethelfled being Alfred's pride and joy. Alfred loves his daughter so much. He's so girl dad, until later. He loses girl dad rights in book 4, just so you know. But it talks about how Edward is Aelswith's pride and joy. And she's also heavily pregnant at this time. She later goes on to give birth to another daughter, but heavily pregnant. And I can't imagine, like, being pregnant while you're watching your son die. Like, the emotions and hormones you already have. Anyway. And I think that you see her giving up her own moral code. You know, this idea that all witchcraft that comes from paganism is evil. She gives that up because she wants to save her son. And does that make her a good mother? I don't know. Does it make her a good person? I don't know. I just think that it's a very important part. And, you know, Edward survives. He comes out of this, and the first thing he does is go straight to his mom. He says, Mom, look, I'm alive. Haha, I'm covered in mud. Haha. He doesn't care. He has not a care in the world. But you just know, like, the relief that she must feel from that. And the next bit that I want to talk about is, I just briefly mentioned book 4 and how Alfred loses girl dad rights, and this is because he decides to marry Aethelflaed to Ethelred, who is Uhtred's cousin and about 12 years older than her, which I know is common, whatever, and she's like 14 or 15 at the time. Again, I know it's common, we're not here to talk about that, but what we are here to talk about is how he treats her. And pretty much everyone knew that Ethelred was going to treat Ethelflaed poorly, except for Ethelflaed. She was the only one. She had this, like, mindset of, there's a line, I think, somewhere in, I'm pretty sure it's book 4, but she is described as being in love with love. She has this, like, fantastical idea until her wedding night, and it doesn't go well. So the first time we see her after her wedding, she is covered in bruises, and it is very clearly laid out in the book that Ethelred beats her, abuses her, and all those kinds of horrible things. And it is excused by pretty much everyone in the narrative other than Uhtred, Gisela, his wife, and Finan, who is one of his friends, and an Irish Christian, an Irish Catholic from Ireland, obviously. Those are, like, pretty much the only 3 people who are like, hey, you should not beat your wife. Everyone else is like, well, she was being disobedient, so it's fine. And what's very, very interesting is for all of book 4, we hear a lot about Alfred and how he justifies the treatment of his own daughter at the hands of her awful, awful, awful husband. But we hear not a lick from Aelswith. And I think that is, like, almost more, like, speaks more to her opinion of what's going on than, like, if Uhtred came out and said, you know, Aelswith didn't care. Because she doesn't say a thing. Not at her wedding, not after her wedding, not until book 6, which is, like, the last time we see Aelswith. Alfred is dying, and Uhtred and Ethelflaed are talking. Ethelflaed is essentially saying that her husband is trying to get their marriage annulled, and not through killing her, but by forcing her into a relationship with one of his men, if you catch my drift, so that he can say that she's having an affair, and therefore he can justifiably divorce her. This is not happening. She is not having an affair. She did earlier, but that guy died. She's not having an affair with anyone at this point. She's just kind of living her own life, trying to, like, live, and he is essentially sending one of his men to assault her so that he can say all of this. And Uhtred's like, well, did you tell your dad? She says, he's been told, but I don't think he believes it. He does, of course, believe in faith and prayer, so he sent me a comb that once belonged to Saint Milburga and says it will strengthen me. Why doesn't he believe you? He thinks I am prone to bad dreams. He also finds Ethelred very loyal, and my mother, of course, adores Ethelred. She would, I said gloomily. Ethelred's wife, Aelswith, was a sour creature, and, like Ethelred, was a Mercian. So, not only do we have silence from Aelswith about the abuse that her daughter is suffering, but she adores her abusive husband. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, even though we can see that she is suffering in the books when her son is suffering, she does not care when her daughter is suffering. So I think we can very firmly place her in the category of bad mom. Then we have a brief little stint where she This is in the TV show. We don't really see her talk to this woman in the books that I can remember. But Edward, her son, at some point when he grows up, before his father dies and before he becomes king, he marries a woman in secret, and they have, in the books it's 2 children, in the TV show it's just 1. And this child is Aethelstan, and if you know anything about English history, Aethelstan is the first king of England. But that marriage between the 2 of them is, in the books, she dies, I think in childbirth, and so there's really no proof that they got married, and so they say that the children are just bastards. In the TV show, the marriage is annulled by sending the woman to a nunnery, because that's something that happens. If you go to a nunnery, the marriage is annulled. And they essentially separated the mother from the children. It's the same thing that they did to Aelswith and his mother when Alfred had his affair with her. And saying affair, obviously between a king and a slave girl, right? We're okay, yeah. And in the TV show, Aelswith hates Edward's new wife and which, let me tell you, she's the one who picked his new wife, okay? And then she hates his new wife, who does kind of suck. I mean, she's just kind of a normal lady who just sucks normally and not in like a morally degenerate kind of way. Her father, I hate him a lot. That's public enemy number 1, just in case you were wondering. But her father sucks and is like discrediting Aelswith. So Aelswith wants to discredit her son, if that makes sense. So Edward's new wife's son. And by doing so, she wants to make Aethelstan, that boy, she wants to uplift him as Edward's true heir, the Atheling. And at one point, she decides to reunite Aethelstan with his mother. And it's just this very sweet scene between the boy and his mom. I think her name is Edwin. She doesn't know that Aelswith is the one who is doing this. And Aelswith is there, but she doesn't recognize that as Aelswith in front of her because, like, they didn't have pictures. She didn't know what the queen looked like. And, you know, she's asking, am I still out of Lady Aelswith's favor? Aelswith is like, oh, Lady Aelswith has never disfavored anyone. We don't believe her, okay? Don't believe her lies. That's a lie. She disfavors a lot of people. Anyway, you can just see that she has pity for this woman who's being told that she's never going to see her son again. She hasn't seen her son since he was born, and now he's 8 years old, and he's grown, and he doesn't know that she's his mom. I'm pretty sure they don't tell him. And then now she's being told she's never going to see him again. And the only thing that she did wrong was pick the wrong guy to marry, because it makes it clear in the books and in the TV show that they were legally married, and everyone else is just trying to bother them. And she just picked the wrong guy. And even though she loved him, she was in love with him, he was in love with her, and then everyone else decided to meddle. And that scene, like, you can see that Aelswith has pity, but her ambition is greater than her pity. And her dislike for this other guy, Ethelhelm, is greater than her desire to keep a mother and a son together. And, you know, maybe she's thinking back to when she was almost separated from her son through death. But, like, is this any better? Edwin's never going to see her son again. Is that any better than him being dead? I don't know. And that scene kind of solidifies that idea that Aelswith not only isn't a good mother to her own children, she also doesn't care about other people's children or their relationship with them. And the only reason she cares for Aethelstan the way she does is because she's trying to use him as a pawn. So you see her, like, taking care of this boy throughout the rest of the season, but she didn't care about him for 8 years. In fact, she actively ruined his life when he was a baby because she didn't care. But now that he's useful to her, she cares. And maybe she does, like, actually feel grief when he almost dies. But I don't know if that's because she's going to lose her chance to undermine Ethelhelm, or if it's because she actually cares about her son's son. I don't know. I don't know. And I think you kind of see that mindset being passed on to Edward, because Edward only cares about his sons when they're in peril, when their lives are in peril, when they're in jeopardy. He like feels all these emotions and he can't think and he can't act. And this is how we see Aelswith with Edward in the season 1, book 2, right? Is this like overwhelming grief that every parent would probably feel if their son was in peril. But when their son isn't in peril, or when their daughter isn't in life-threatening peril, Ethelred's not going to kill her, but he is going to beat her, and she doesn't care because she's alive. Anyway, and then we have one more segment to talk about, and that is this is the segment where we get into major spoilers for season 5. Okay, so if you are really upset about that, then perhaps don't watch this little segment. I'll try to put some timestamps just so you know like what segment we're talking about, or when it's over, so you can skip it. But what happens in season 5, Aelswith dies in like book 6, so she's not in anything past that, so this is movie or TV show only stuff. In season 5, Ethelfled is Queen of Mercia, and she is diagnosed essentially with breast cancer. And partway through season 5 is rough. Everyone dies, okay? Don't hold on to anyone, okay? They die. And that includes Ethelfled. She dies of breast cancer. And after she dies, Uhtred goes to find Aelswith, and she is in the chapel, and she's praying because she's a pious, devout woman who believes that prayer will fix it, right? That'll fix the problem. So this scene between Eliza Butterworth, who plays Aelswith, and Alexander Draymond, who plays Uhtred, oh my gosh, it's actually one of the best scenes in the entire show. It's so well done, and like cinematographically very beautiful in the way that they've done this part. And it's so simple, and it packs the greatest punch. Aelswith has just lost her daughter not to like the sword, or to old age, or to childbirth, these things that are typical for people in this time period. She has lost her to cancer, which is something that they didn't even really understand at that time. And this is before she even really knows that Ethelfled has died. But she's on her knees, and she's in this chapel. It's very dimly lit. And she's praying, "Please let my Lord listen to the words of this servant." And Uhtred comes in, and he says her name, Lady Aelswith. She says, "You do not need to say anything, Lord Uhtred. I would ask you, do you hear anything?" And Uhtred said, "It's night, the town is asleep." Aelswith says, "No, not in here, not out there. In here, in this room, do you hear anything?" And he says, "No, nothing but our own voices." Aelswith says, "Mere mortals, I do not care for our voices. He is not speaking. I thought that he would speak to me now. Is it not clear that I need him? All I have ever asked of him is his voice when I needed it." And it's very clear that she's talking about God. She is on her knees praying, and she is like begging God to hear her. Not just to hear her, but to respond, to speak back. And Uhtred says, perhaps his silence is him offering you solace. Aelswith says, "I do not need his solace. I need him to speak to me. My life I have given to him. I have prayed for so many hours, Lord Uhtred. I have begged him to save her. I need to know that he is listening." And Uhtred says, "I fear your prayers have been wasted," because she's gone. She's dead. She's passed a long time ago, actually, probably hours before this. Aelswith goes back to praying, "Please let my lord the king listen to the words of his servant. Please let my lord listen to the words of his servant." And he tries to talk to her again, and she says, "I am trying to make him hear me. Do not say it. Do not say the words. He has forsaken me. He has forsaken her. I have given him the entirety of my life, and I am left with nothing." Like, hello? There is something so, like, devastating about a very pious person losing faith. Aelswith doesn't completely lose her faith, but in this moment, she has lost her faith because her daughter is dead. And, like, what? In her eyes, she has done everything right. You know, we look at her and we go, "Girl, I don't think you were following the statutes that God has commanded of us." But in her eyes, she has done everything right. She has said all the prayers. She has done all the sacraments. She has given over her life, her husband's life. She has given up, like, anger towards her husband for cheating on her for years. She's given these things up. She's raised these children in the best way that she thinks she can in the path of the Lord to become all these great people. And in her mind, still her child died. So what does any of it matter? She says all of that, and this is what I get. And so, like, to see her lose that faith, someone who has been so, like, staunchly, like, we must have faith, we must pray, and everything is going to work out. And then it doesn't. And she's devastated. She's devastated. He has forsaken me. That's what she says. He has forsaken me. And then she cries and she weeps, and Uhtred lays a hand on her shoulder, and Uhtred and Aelswith have never gotten along. They hate each other. Actually, she tries to get him killed, I think, every single episode of all these seasons. She hates him. But in that moment, there is no one who loved Ethelfled as much as Uhtred did. Like, the two of them are the two people who loved Ethelfled the most. At least in her eyes, right? He lays his hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. And this man that she has despised for years and years and years and sought the death of for years is the only person who can comfort her, who does comfort her. And she lays her hand over his and just holds on to him, because that's all she has. That's all she has in that moment, is him to hold on to. And then she asks, where is Aelfwin? And Aelfwin is Ethelfled's daughter. She's waiting for the Witan, Uhtred says. Aelswith says they will take advantage of her. Aelfwin is too young and she is not worldly. They will turn on her. And so her grief that she was feeling over the death of her daughter now turns into, not, I wouldn't say ambition, but now her goal, she couldn't save Ethelfled, but she's going to save Ethelfled's daughter. She couldn't save her own daughter, but she's going to save her daughter's daughter, her granddaughter. And she doesn't do a great job, honestly. But she tries. She really tries for the rest of the season to take care of Aelfwin. And Uhtred says she can gain their respect just as Ethelfled did. And Aelswith said, as wise as she had become, Ethelfled still wished to believe the best in people. But she was wrong. There has already been so much death, Uhtred. I could not bear more of it. And she genuinely believes that the people will kill her daughter or sell her off. And they try to. They truly do try to sell her off to the highest bidder. You can just see where Aelswith's grief turns into determination. And it's a very, very powerful scene. And if you don't care to watch any of the show, I would still watch that scene. It's like that moment when devotion turns sour. And you just, for that moment, she did not believe. And I think, the death of her child caused that. I don't think it makes her a good mom. I think she was a horrible mother. I think she was a horrible person, but she's a great character, especially for a discussion like this. Yeah, so I don't really think I have anything else to say about her. I did kind of say that Mary was going to come up again, but she really only comes up. There's one point when Ethelfled is, their big war is about to happen, and when Ethelfled is looking for help, she says, "Mary, save us." And I think that's very interesting. Could obviously be just like a, God save our souls kind of thing, where she's just referencing her. But it was a reference, so I thought I'd bring it up. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say about that. So I guess this is the end of our first episode of Motherhood and Media. Leave a comment down below about what mothers that you like seeing in media that would be interesting for me to talk about, you two. If there's any other ones than the ones I mentioned previously that you're like, girl, you got to talk about this, I absolutely would love to. I do intend also perhaps on doing a series about fatherhood. And then I also would love to talk about siblings. Clearly, the familial relationship is something that is very important to me, if you couldn't tell. So I think we'll do that at some point. But let me know what you thought about this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Just listening to me talk about things that probably don't make so much sense because my brain is scrambled and scattered. But I love doing this. I'm just so very having a great time. Doing research and studying things and like analyzing things and looking at them has always been a great love of mine, which is why, I went out and got my master's degree, even though I didn't need to, but I did because I like to research things. And that's what we're doing here now. So thank you for being here, for listening to me ramble. And I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. And I hope I'll see you in the next video. If you are interested in this sort of content, this is the kind of stuff I talk about, and also other things. And apparently sometimes I do videos where I make things and show you guys. So if that's interesting to you, maybe subscribe if you would like to. You know, it's free, and I probably won't pop up too often and bother you, but I'll bother you sometimes if you want me to. Drop a like as well if that's something you want to do. And maybe even comment. I don't know. Whatever suits your fancy, I guess. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!